Kyle Thompson, hardworking American, who built a successful construction company from scratch. After a devastating worksite accident left me partially paralyzed, my son and daughter-in-law's true colors emerged. "You're nothing but a cripple, a burden we're forced to feed," my daughter-in-law Amanda hissed when she thought I couldn't hear. But fate had other plans when my wealthy brother passed away unexpectedly. What happened next changed everything. Before I begin this story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by family. I was born in a small town outside of Pittsburgh where my father worked in the steel mills. We never had much, but my parents taught me the value of hard work and determination. When I was 18, I started working construction jobs to pay my way through community college. I learned everything I could about the business from the ground up. By the time I was 25, I had saved enough to start my own small contracting business. Thompson Construction began with just me and two other guys in a rented garage. We took any job we could get, no matter how small. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week for years. Slowly but surely, the company grew. I met my wife Susan when I was building an addition on her parents' house. She was smart, kind, and believed in me even when I doubted myself. We got married after just 6 months of dating, and a year later, our son Jackson was born. Those were the happiest days of my life, watching my family and my business grow together. My brother Frank and I were always close, though we took different paths. While I built my construction empire with calloused hands and sweat, Frank went to college and became an investment banker. He made a fortune in the stock market during the 90s and lived in a mansion in Connecticut. We were different, but we respected each other's choices. Frank never married or had children, so Jackson was like the son he never had. 5 years ago, I lost Susan to breast cancer. It was the hardest thing I had ever faced. She fought bravely for 3 years, but in the end, the disease took her. Jackson was devastated, but we helped each other through the grief. At least that is what I thought at the time. By then, Thompson Construction had become one of the most respected firms in Western Pennsylvania. We employed over 50 people, and I had contracts worth millions. I was proud of what I had built from nothing. My greatest joy was teaching Jackson the business. He started working summers when he was 16, and after college he joined full-time. I thought I was grooming my legacy, someone who shared my values of honest work and treating people right. When Jackson met Amanda at a charity golf tournament, I was happy for him. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to make him happy. They dated for a year before getting engaged. At their wedding, I gave a toast about family being the most important thing in life, about loyalty and standing by each other through good times and bad. I meant every word. The last Thanksgiving before the accident was particularly memorable. Frank flew in from Connecticut, and we all gathered at my house. Amanda prepared a beautiful meal, and we sat around the table sharing stories and laughing. Jackson announced they were thinking about starting a family, and I allowed myself to imagine being a grandfather. Frank slapped me on the back and said, "You did good, little brother. You built something that will outlast all of us." I was 61 years old, still strong and active. I still visited job sites regularly, inspecting the work and talking to my employees. I had planned to gradually hand over more responsibility to Jackson over the next 5 years, then retire completely by 67. I imagined spending my golden years enjoying the fruits of my labor, watching my grandchildren grow up, maybe traveling a bit. The future seemed secure and bright. How quickly everything can change. It happened on a Tuesday morning in April. We were building a new office complex downtown, and I had gone to inspect the progress on the 5th floor. It was a routine visit. I had been on hundreds of construction sites over the decades, always careful, always following safety protocols. I remember walking along the edge of what would become a conference room, discussing the electrical work with the foreman. The temporary railing was in place, but unknown to us, it had been improperly secured. When I leaned against it to point out something on the blueprints, it gave way. I fell 50 feet onto a concrete slab below. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital tubes and wires connecting me to machines that beeped and hummed. The doctor explained that I had broken my back, shattered my pelvis, and suffered a traumatic brain injury. I had undergone multiple surgeries to stabilize my spine and repair internal damage. "Mr. Thompson," the neurosurgeon said gently, "the spinal cord injury has resulted in partial paralysis. You have some movement in your upper body, but there is significant nerve damage affecting your lower extremities." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you saying I won't walk again?" "There is always hope for some recovery with intensive rehabilitation," he replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "But I need to be honest with you. The damage is severe. You will likely need assistance with daily activities for the foreseeable future." My mind reeled with the implications. Me, Kyle Thompson, who had built a company with his bare hands, who had never depended on anyone, reduced to needing help to get dressed or use the bathroom. It seemed impossible, like a nightmare I would wake from any moment. Jackson and Amanda were there every day during those first weeks in the hospital. Jackson would hold my hand, tears in his eyes, promising that everything would be okay. Amanda brought home-cooked meals to supplement the hospital food and fresh clothes for Jackson, who often slept in the chair beside my bed. "We will get through this together, Dad," Jackson said. "You are the strongest person I know." I clung to that optimism, that belief in my own strength. I approached physical therapy with the same determination I had used to build my business. I would prove the doctors wrong. I would walk again. I had to. But progress was painfully slow. Weeks turned into months. I could move my arms and had some feeling in my thighs, but my legs remained mostly unresponsive. The pain was constant, a burning sensation that medication only dulled rather than eliminated. As my hospital stay extended, I began to notice subtle changes in Jackson and Amanda's behavior. The visits became shorter, less frequent. There were whispered conversations in the hallway, glances exchanged when they thought I was not watching. A hint of impatience when Amanda had to wait for a nurse to finish helping me. After 3 months in the hospital and another 2 in a rehabilitation facility, the insurance company decided I had received all the benefit I could from inpatient care. It was time to discuss discharge plans. "You will need significant support at home," my case manager explained. "Your house would require extensive modifications for wheelchair accessibility, and you will need daily assistance with personal care." That was when Jackson and Amanda offered to have me move in with them. They had a ranch-style house with fewer stairs than my 2-story home. Jackson said it made the most sense. "You can stay with us until you are stronger, Dad," he said. "It will be easier for everyone." I did not want to be a burden, but I also did not see many alternatives. My brother Frank offered to hire a full-time nurse for me at my own house, but Jackson insisted that family should take care of family. At the time, I was touched by what I thought was his devotion. The day I left the rehabilitation center in a wheelchair was one of the most difficult of my life. Harder than the day I buried Susan in some ways. At least with her death, there had been closure, and ending I could eventually accept. This felt like an endless limbo, a half-life where I was neither the man I had been nor fully reconciled to who I had become. As the orderly wheeled me out to Jackson's car, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. The man looking back at me was gaunt, with hollow cheeks and haunted eyes. My once powerful shoulders were hunched, my muscular frame wasted from months of immobility. I barely recognized myself. And in that moment, I felt the first stirrings of something I had never allowed myself to feel before: fear about the future, and what it held for me. My first few weeks living with Jackson and Amanda were an uncomfortable adjustment for all of us. Their house, while more accessible than mine would have been, was not designed for someone in a wheelchair. Doorways were too narrow, countertops too high, and the bathroom was a daily challenge. Jackson had hired an aide to come for a few hours each day to help with my personal care, but there were many hours when I was alone or dependent on him or Amanda. I tried to be as independent as possible, but simple tasks that I had once taken for granted now required exhausting effort or humiliating assistance. I noticed Amanda's growing resentment in small ways at first. The tight smile when she had to rearrange furniture to accommodate my wheelchair. The exasperated sigh when I dropped something and needed help picking it up. The way she would talk about me in the third person when I was sitting right there, as if my physical limitations had somehow diminished my ability to understand. "Does he need his medication now?" she would ask Jackson, despite the fact that I was fully capable of answering for myself. One evening, about a month after I moved in, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. They did not realize how sound carried in the ranch house, especially at night, when everything was quiet. "This is not what I signed up for." Amanda's voice was sharp with frustration. "How long is he going to be here?" "The doctor said it could be years before he reaches maximum recovery, and even then." "What am I supposed to do?" Jackson sounded defensive. "He is my father." "Your father, who has a house of his own and plenty of money to hire full-time care," she countered. "Why does it have to be us? Why does he have to be here?" Their words cut through me like a physical pain. I had never wanted to be a burden on anyone, especially not my own son. But hearing the resentment in Amanda's voice made me realize just how precarious my situation was. The next morning, I suggested to Jackson that perhaps we should look into other arrangements. "I appreciate everything you and Amanda have done," I said carefully, "but I know this is difficult for everyone. I could sell my house and move into an assisted living facility or hire live-in help." Jackson looked stricken. "No, Dad, absolutely not. We want you here. Amanda is just adjusting. We all are." I did not push the issue, partly because I was not ready to face the reality of my diminished independence, and partly because I still hoped for more recovery. The physical therapist, who came to the house 3 times a week, was encouraging about the increased sensation I was experiencing in my legs, though my mobility remained severely limited. Meanwhile, I tried to contribute in ways I could. I offered advice when Jackson called me about issues at work, though I noticed he called less and less frequently. I had been forced to take a step back from daily operations at Thompson Construction, with Jackson taking over as acting CEO. I still owned the company, but my ability to oversee it was compromised by my condition. About 2 months after moving in with Jackson and Amanda, I began to hear troubling things about the business. A former employee visited me and mentioned that Jackson had laid off several longtime workers, including some who had been with me from the beginning. He had also apparently underbid on a major project, one that I knew would barely break even at the price he had quoted. When I tried to discuss these concerns with Jackson, he became defensive. "Things change, Dad. The market is different now. Your old ways of doing business are not necessarily the best approach anymore." His dismissal stung. I had built that company from nothing. Weathered economic downturns, maintained our reputation for quality through decades. And now my son was implying that my business acumen was outdated, irrelevant. As the weeks passed, my room at Jackson and Amanda's house began to feel more like a prison than a home. They renovated the guest room upstairs for themselves, leaving me alone on the main floor, for my convenience. Meals appeared on trays, often lukewarm and unappetizing. My requests for specific items from the store were frequently forgotten. Then came the day that everything changed. I had wheeled myself into the kitchen for a glass of water earlier than usual, because of pain that had woken me. Amanda was on the phone, unaware of my presence just around the corner. "I cannot keep doing this, Jenna," she was saying to someone, presumably her sister. "You have no idea what it is like living with him. Jackson is at work all day, and I am stuck here with a man who cannot even use the bathroom without help." There was a pause as she listened to the person on the other end. "No, the doctors say there probably will not be much more improvement. This is it. And I did not marry Jackson to become a nurse to his father." Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper that I will never forget. "You are nothing but a cripple, Kyle. A burden we are forced to feed and care for. It would have been better for everyone if that fall had killed you outright." I sat there frozen in shock as Amanda continued her conversation, unaware that I had heard every word. The cruelty of it stole my breath. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life, more helpless than when I had first woken in the hospital. Later that day, I called my brother Frank. It was time to make other arrangements. I was still reeling from Amanda's cruel words when I received the news that changed everything. Frank, my older brother, had died suddenly of a heart attack. He was only 64, seemingly in good health, gone without warning. The shock of losing my only sibling, my lifelong friend and confidant, was overwhelming. Frank had been my link to the past, the one person who knew me before I was Kyle Thompson of Thompson Construction, or Jackson's father, or the man in the wheelchair. He knew me when I was just Kyle, the scrappy kid from Pittsburgh with big dreams. When Jackson told me about Frank's death, I broke down in a way I had not allowed myself to do since the accident. The grief was compounded by the realization that I had lost one of the few people who truly cared about me for myself, not out of obligation. "The funeral is in Connecticut on Saturday," Jackson informed me. "I am not sure if you will be up to traveling that far. Maybe you should stay here and rest." I looked at him through my tears. He was my brother. "Of course I am going." Jackson seemed uncomfortable. "It is just that it will be complicated with the wheelchair, the long drive." "I will manage," I said firmly. "I need to say goodbye to Frank." The journey to Connecticut was indeed difficult. The 5-hour drive was painful for my still healing body, and the arrangements at the hotel were not ideal for my needs. But being there honoring Frank's memory was worth every discomfort. The funeral was small but dignified, much as Frank would have wanted. I sat in my wheelchair near the front of the church, conscious of the pitying glances from people who had known me as the strong, capable younger brother. Now I was the object of whispered sympathy. After the service, a distinguished older man approached me. "Mr. Thompson, I am Harold Winters, your brother's attorney. When you have a moment, I would like to speak with you about some matters concerning Frank's estate." Jackson, who had been standing nearby, immediately stepped forward. "I am Jackson Thompson, Kyle's son. Perhaps I should be included in this conversation given my father's condition." I noticed Amanda perk up at the mention of Frank's estate. She moved closer, her expression suddenly solicitous, as she placed a hand on my shoulder. "If that is what Mr. Thompson wants," the lawyer said neutrally, looking to me for confirmation. "Yes, my son can join us." I agreed, more out of exhaustion than desire to include him. The meeting was set for the following morning at the lawyer's office. That night I overheard Jackson and Amanda discussing it in the hotel room we were sharing. "Frank was worth millions," Amanda said in an excited whisper. "And with no children of his own, who else would he leave it to?" "Let us not get ahead of ourselves," Jackson cautioned. "Uncle Frank had a lot of charitable interests. He might have left everything to some wildlife foundation or something." "But your father was his only close family," Amanda persisted. "It makes sense that he would inherit. And if he does—" She did not finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. If I inherited Frank's fortune, it would eventually pass to Jackson, and by extension, to her. The next morning, we arrived at Harold Winters's office. It was in a stately old building in downtown Hartford, the kind of place that spoke of old money and discretion. The lawyer ushered us into a conference room, where several other people were already seated, distant cousins and business associates of Frank's. "Now that everyone is here, we can proceed with the reading of the will," Harold said once we were settled. He opened a leather portfolio and began to read the formal legal language of my brother's last testament. Frank had indeed made several generous bequests to conservation organizations and his alma mater. There were smaller amounts for longtime employees and friends. And then Harold reached the main portion of the will. "To my brother Kyle Thompson, I leave the remainder of my estate, including my investments, properties, and personal effects, with a total approximate value of $15 million. There was a moment of stunned silence. I felt lightheaded, not quite processing what I had just heard. $15 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined possessing, despite my own success in business. Additionally," Harold continued, "I include herewith a personal letter to my brother to be opened in private." He handed me a sealed envelope with Kyle written on it in Frank's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I accepted it. I became aware of Amanda squeezing Jackson's arm, her face transformed by a smile of barely contained excitement. Jackson looked shell-shocked, his eyes darting between me and the lawyer. "There are some additional stipulations," Harold went on. "The entire estate is to be placed in a trust with Kyle Thompson as the sole beneficiary during his lifetime. He will have complete control over the assets, but they cannot be transferred to other individuals until after his death, except for charitable donations as he sees fit." I saw Amanda's smile falter slightly at this news. After the formal reading concluded, Harold asked to speak with me privately. Jackson immediately objected. "My father needs my assistance," he insisted. "I believe I can manage a private conversation, Jackson," I said firmly. "Please wait outside with Amanda." Once they had left, Harold closed the door and sat across from me. "Your brother was very concerned about you after your accident, Mr. Thompson. We spoke at length about your situation." "I did not realize he knew so much about it," I admitted. "Frank hired a private investigator to check on your welfare when he became concerned about your son's handling of your care," Harold said quietly. "He was very disturbed by what he learned." He slid a folder across the table to me. "This contains the investigator's reports. Frank wanted you to have this information along with his letter. I suggest you read both before making any decisions about your future arrangements." I left the lawyer's office in a daze, the sealed letter and folder heavy in my lap. Jackson wheeled me to the car, his manner suddenly solicitous. "So, Dad, $15 million, he said with forced casualness as he drove us back to the hotel. "That is quite a windfall." "Yes, it is," I agreed, not elaborating. "We will need to think about how to manage it," he continued. "I know some excellent financial advisors through the business contacts I have been developing." "Frank's money manager has done well enough," I replied. "I see no reason to change that arrangement." Jackson frowned slightly. "Still, I think we should discuss the implications. This changes things." Indeed it did, but not in the way Jackson imagined. Back at the hotel, while Jackson and Amanda went to check out, I finally had a moment alone to open Frank's letter. His familiar handwriting brought fresh grief, but also a strange comfort. "Dear Kyle," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone and you are now a wealthy man. I hope it brings you some comfort in what I know has been a difficult time, but money alone cannot solve the problem I see you facing." Frank went on to explain that he had become concerned when my calls became less frequent after I moved in with Jackson and Amanda. His investigator had observed their neglect, overheard their complaints about my presence, and documented Amanda's particular cruelty. "You deserve better than this little brother," Frank wrote. "You built an empire with your own hands. You raised a son who should honor and respect you. Instead, they treat you as a burden and inconvenience to be tolerated only because of what they might eventually gain from you." The letter continued with Frank's characteristic bluntness. "I know you, Kyle. You are too proud to complain, too stubborn to admit when you need help. But I am telling you now, from beyond the grave if necessary, that you need to take control of your life again. Use this money to secure the care and respect you deserve. Do not let them diminish who you are because of what happened to you." The final paragraph brought tears to my eyes. "You were always the strong one, Kyle, even though I was older. You built something real, something that will last. Do not let anyone take that from you or make you forget the man you are. I love you, brother. Now go show them what Kyle Thompson is really made of." When Jackson and Amanda returned to the room, they found me sitting by the window, the letter folded in my lap, a new resolve hardening within me. "Everything okay, Dad?" Jackson asked, his voice carefully concerned. "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "Everything is finally becoming very clear." The drive back to Pennsylvania was filled with Amanda's sudden solicitude. She fussed over my comfort, asking repeatedly if I needed anything, if I was in pain, if the temperature in the car was suitable. It was as if a switch had been flipped, transforming her from resentful caretaker to devoted daughter-in-law overnight. The $15 million inheritance had worked a miracle on her attitude, if not on my paralysis. Jackson, too, was newly attentive, talking about modifications they could make to the house to better accommodate me. "We could convert the den into a more spacious bedroom for you," he suggested. "Maybe add one of those wheelchair-accessible bathrooms. No expense spared, of course." I listened to their plans with a detached interest, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Frank's letter and the investigators' reports burned in my mind like a flame illuminating the path forward. Upon our return, I asked Jackson to contact Harold Winters and arrange for me to speak with him via video conference. "There are details about the trust that I need to clarify," I explained. "I can handle that for you," Jackson offered quickly. "No need to tire yourself out with financial minutia." "I appreciate that," I said mildly. "But as the beneficiary, I should understand the terms personally." A flicker of concern crossed his face, but he nodded. "Of course, Dad. Whatever you think is best." The next few days saw a flurry of activity in the house. Amanda scrubbed and polished everything, bought new bedding for my room, ordered a specialized mattress to prevent bed sores. She began preparing elaborate meals, consulting nutritionists online about diets optimal for someone with my condition. "We want you to be comfortable here, Kyle," she said one evening as she served a gourmet meal she had spent hours preparing. "This is your home for as long as you want it to be." I noticed she had begun calling me by my first name, as if we were now peers rather than in-laws with a complicated relationship. The woman who had once whispered that I was nothing but a cripple now acted as if I were a treasured family member. Jackson, meanwhile, suddenly wanted my input on business decisions. "The company is still yours, Dad," he insisted. "Your experience is invaluable. I should have been consulting you more all along." I gave my opinions when asked, but I also observed. I saw how Thompson Construction had changed under Jackson's leadership. He had laid off loyal employees to cut costs, replaced quality materials with cheaper alternatives, cultivated relationships with inspectors that seemed questionable at best. The company I had built on a foundation of integrity was being transformed into something I barely recognized. A week after our return from Connecticut, I had my video conference with Harold Winters. I arranged for it to take place while Jackson was at work with only my daytime aide present in the house. "Mr. Thompson," Harold greeted me warmly. "How are you settling in after your brother's passing?" "Still processing everything," I admitted, "but I have made some decisions I would like to discuss with you." We talked for over an hour about the trust, my options, and the control I had over the assets. Harold confirmed what I had suspected. The structure Frank had created gave me complete autonomy over how the money was used during my lifetime, with no obligation to consult or include Jackson in any decisions. "Your brother was very specific about this," Harold explained. "He wanted to ensure that you had the resources to secure whatever care and living situation would be best for you without pressure from other interested parties." After the call, I began making my own plans. I contacted a real estate agent to help me find an accessible apartment or condominium. I researched professional home care services. I consulted with a different attorney, one with expertise in business law, about my options regarding Thompson Construction. All of this I did quietly when Jackson and Amanda were not around. My daytime aide, Maria, became my ally in these preparations. She had witnessed the neglect I had endured before the inheritance and was fully supportive of my desire for independence. "You deserve better, Mr. Thompson," she said simply when I explained what I was planning. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." 2 weeks after the will reading, I was ready to make my move. I waited for an evening when both Jackson and Amanda would be home and asked them to join me in the living room for a family discussion. Amanda had gone all out with dinner that night, serving prime rib with all the trimmings, my favorite meal that she had never bothered to prepare before. She poured expensive wine and chatted brightly about plans for the weekend. Once we were settled in the living room, I took a deep breath and began. "I want to thank you both for taking me in after my accident. I know it has not been easy." "It has been our pleasure, Dad," Jackson said quickly. "Family takes care of a family." Amanda nodded enthusiastically. "We would not have it any other way." I looked at her directly. "That is interesting, Amanda, because I distinctly remember you saying something quite different." "What was it again?" "Oh yes, you are nothing but a cripple. A burden we are forced to feed and care for." The color drained from her face. I never said that." "You must have misheard or misunderstood." "I heard you very clearly," I said calmly. "Just as Frank's investigator heard you and documented your words along with many other instances of neglect and resentment from both of you." Jackson stared at me in shock. "Investigator? What are you talking about?" I explained about the private investigator Frank had hired, the reports that documented how they had treated me when they thought no one who mattered was watching. "That is an invasion of privacy." Amanda sputtered, her friendly facade crumbling. "He had no right to spy on us in our own home." "It was my brother looking out for my welfare," I corrected her. "And I am grateful that he did, because it has shown me exactly who you both are when you think there is nothing to gain." Jackson leaned forward, his expression conciliatory. "Dad, I know things have not been perfect. We were all adjusting to a difficult situation. But we care about you, we really do." "You care about what I can provide," I countered. "My company, my inheritance, not me." "That is not fair," he protested, but there was a guilty flush creeping up his neck. "I have made some decisions," I continued. "First, I have leased an accessible apartment downtown. I will be moving there next week. I have hired a professional care team who will assist me as needed." Amanda's eyes widened. "But there is no need for that. We can take care of you right here." "Second," I went on as if she had not spoken, "I am resuming active control of Thompson Construction. I may be in a wheelchair, but my mind is perfectly sound. I will be reviewing all decisions made during my absence and making necessary changes. Now it was Jackson's turn to pale. Dad, you do not understand the current market. The changes I made were essential for the company's survival. We will see about that, I said. And finally, I want you both to know that I am amending my will. The inheritance from Frank is in a trust that I control during my lifetime. Upon my death, it will not be going to either of you. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Amanda's composure shattered completely. "You cannot do this," she cried. "After everything we have done for you, taking you in, caring for you when no one else would." "When no one else would," I repeated quietly. Frank offered to hire full-time care for me in my own home. I declined because Jackson insisted that family should take care of family. I thought he meant it out of love, not calculation. I turned to my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had trusted with my legacy. "You have disappointed me, Jackson. Not because you found it difficult to care for me, but because you were not honest about it. Because you saw me as a means to an end rather than your father who needed your help." Jackson looked stricken, torn between anger and shame. "Dad, please. We can work this out." "Yes, we can," I agreed. "But not here, and not under the pretense that everything has been fine. I am taking back control of my life, my company, and my future. You can both decide what role you want to play in that future, but it will be on my terms, not yours." I wheeled myself away from them back to the small room that had been my prison for months. Behind me, I could hear Amanda sobbing theatrically, and Jackson trying to calm her. But for the first time since the accident, I felt a sense of power returning. Not the physical strength I had lost perhaps, but something more important, the strength of knowing my own worth regardless of my limitations. The week following my confrontation with Jackson and Amanda was tense but productive. I moved forward with my plans for independence while they alternated between attempts to change my mind and sullen resentment. "You are making a mistake, Dad," Jackson insisted as I finalized arrangements for my new apartment. "You need family around you, not strangers." "I will have people around me who respect me," I replied simply. "That is what I need most." Amanda tried a different approach, tearfully apologizing for any misunderstandings and promising that things would be different going forward. "We can make this work," she pleaded. "Give us another chance." But the mask had slipped too far, the truth had been revealed too clearly. There was no going back to pretending we were a happy, caring family unit. My new apartment was in a modern building downtown, with wide doorways, accessible bathrooms, and a view of the river. The property manager had worked with me to ensure every detail was suitable for my needs. It cost a significant amount to lease, but thanks to Frank, money was no longer a concern. I hired a team of 3 caregivers who would rotate shifts, ensuring I had assistance when needed, while still maintaining my privacy and independence. Maria, my ally from Jackson's house, agreed to be one of them. She had given notice to the agency that had placed her with Jackson and Amanda, preferring to work directly for me. "I believe in karma, Mr. Thompson," she told me when I asked why she had been so helpful. "What goes around comes around. They treated you badly, and now they are facing the consequences." The day I moved out of Jackson and Amanda's house was both emotional and liberating. A specialized transport service came to collect me and my belongings, which were surprisingly few. Many of my personal items had remained in storage after the accident, as there had not been room for them in the small bedroom I had occupied. Jackson stood awkwardly in the driveway as the transport workers loaded my things. Amanda remained inside, having suddenly remembered errands she needed to run. "You do not have to do this," Jackson said one last time. "We can work things out as a family." I looked at my son, seeing both the boy I had raised and the man he had become. This is not about punishing you, Jackson. It is about me reclaiming my dignity, something I should never have had to fight for with my own son. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. What about the company? Are you really going to take that away from me too? The company was never yours to lose, I reminded him gently. It was always mine to entrust to you when you were ready. I am not convinced that time has come. I left him standing in the driveway, a mixture of anger and uncertainty on his face. It was painful, this fracture in our relationship, but necessary. Some breaks need to occur before healing can begin. My new apartment felt immediately more like home than Jackson's house ever had. It was designed with my needs in mind, from the height of the countertops to the roll-in shower. For the first time since the accident, I could navigate my living space without constantly being reminded of my limitations. The day after I moved in, I had a video conference with the management team at Thompson Construction. Many were surprised to see me taking an active role again, but most seemed relieved. Jackson had made himself unpopular with his cost-cutting measures and arbitrary decisions. We will be making some changes, I informed them. Jackson will remain involved, but I will be resuming oversight of major decisions. My condition has not affected my judgment or my commitment to the principles on which I built this company. I rehired several of the experienced employees Jackson had laid off, renegotiated with suppliers to restore the quality standards we had been known for, and initiated a review of all contracts signed during my absence. The company had suffered under Jackson's leadership, but the damage was not irreparable. Jackson's reaction to these changes was a mixture of resentment and reluctant acceptance. He knew he had no legal grounds to challenge my authority as the majority owner, especially with the evidence of his mismanagement mounting. "You are undermining me," he complained during a private meeting in my new office, which had been modified to accommodate my wheelchair. "How am I supposed to lead when you countermand my decisions?" "Leadership is earned, not granted," I told him. "Show me you can uphold the values this company was built on, and you will have more autonomy. Continue to cut corners and mistreat employees, and you will have less." It was a difficult conversation, but a necessary one. Jackson had grown up with privilege. I had never known the security of a successful family business, the certainty that it would one day be his. Perhaps I had failed him by not making him work harder for it, by not ensuring he understood the responsibility that came with such an inheritance. As the weeks passed, I settled into my new life. My physical condition improved somewhat with proper care and consistent therapy. I gained strength in my upper body, increased sensation in my legs, though walking remained beyond my capabilities. But I adapted, finding new ways to accomplish tasks, accepting help when needed, without feeling diminished by it. I reconnected with old friends who had been subtly discouraged from visiting me at Jackson's house. Amanda had always found reasons why it was not a good day for visitors, gradually isolating me from my social network. Now I hosted dinner parties in my accessible apartment, using caterers when necessary, but enjoying the company of people who valued me for myself, not what I could provide them. One such friend was Gerald, a former competitor who had become a close associate over the years. He visited me a month after my move and was clearly pleased with what he found. "You look like yourself again, Kyle," he observed. "There is color in your face, light in your eyes. That accident took a lot from you, but it did not take everything." "No," I agreed. "It did not. And what it took might have been replaced by something just as valuable in a different way." "What is that?" he asked. "Perspective," I said, after a moment's reflection. "I see more clearly now who people really are, what truly matters. When everything is stripped away, the facade peeled back, you learn who stands with you and who was just waiting for what they could get from you." Gerald nodded thoughtfully. "And Jackson?" Will you reconcile with him? It was a question I had been asking myself. Despite everything, he was still my son, my only child, the last connection to Susan and the family we had created together. The door is open, I said carefully. But he needs to walk through it honestly, not because of what he thinks he can gain. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, Jackson arrived at my apartment unannounced. Maria let him in, giving me a questioning look to make sure it was okay. Jackson stood awkwardly in my living room, taking in the spacious, accessible layout, the quality furnishings, the view of the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. "Nice place," he said finally. "It suits you." "Thank you," I replied. "Would you like to sit down?" He took a seat on the sofa, perching on the edge as if unsure of his welcome. I noticed he had come alone without Amanda. "How are things?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Complicated," he admitted. "Amanda and I are taking some time apart." This was surprising news. "I am sorry to hear that." He shrugged. "Do not be. It has been coming for a while. The situation with you just brought a lot of things to the surface." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "She was not the person I thought she was. Or maybe I was not the person I thought I was when I was with her. I do not know anymore." I waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "I have been doing a lot of thinking since you left," he continued. "About the company, about how I handled things after your accident, about the kind of son I have been." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "I am ashamed, Dad, of how I treated you, of how I let Amanda treat you, of what I did to the company you built." His admission hung in the air between us, raw and honest, in a way we had not been with each other in a long time. "Why did you come here tonight, Jackson?" I asked quietly. "Not for money," he said quickly. "Not for the inheritance or the company or anything like that. I came because—" he swallowed hard. "Because you are my father and I miss you. Because I want to try to make things right, if that is even possible anymore." I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but all I saw was genuine remorse and uncertainty. "It will not be easy," I told him. "Trust once broken is hard to rebuild, but not impossible." A flicker of hope crossed his features. "What would it take?" "Time," I said simply. "Consistency. Actions that match your words. I cannot simply forget what happened, but I am willing to move forward if you are truly committed to change." It was the beginning of a long, sometimes difficult process of reconciliation. Jackson moved out of the house he had shared with Amanda and found an apartment of his own. He began seeing a therapist to work through his issues with entitlement and responsibility. At the company, he made efforts to learn from the senior employees he had previously dismissed to understand the values I had built the business on. There were setbacks and disagreements, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But slowly, gradually, our relationship began to heal. Not to what it had been before, but to something new, perhaps more honest than it had ever been. One year after my brother Frank's death, I hosted a small gathering in my apartment to mark the anniversary. Jackson was there, as were several close friends and colleagues. Maria, who had become more than just a caregiver, but a trusted friend, helped with the arrangements. Looking around at the people assembled, I reflected on the journey of the past year. My body was still confined to the wheelchair, though I had regained more function than the doctors had initially predicted. I could now stand for short periods with support, a victory that had seemed impossible in those early days. But the greater transformation had been internal. The accident and its aftermath had stripped away illusions, forced me to confront harsh truths about relationships I had taken for granted. It had been painful, but ultimately clarifying. Thompson Construction was thriving again under shared leadership. Jackson and I had found a working arrangement that played to both our strengths. He brought energy and fresh ideas while I provided experience and perspective. The company's reputation for quality and integrity had been restored, and we were more successful than ever. Jackson and Amanda had divorced, a process that revealed even more about her character when she attempted to claim part of the company as a marital asset. The courts had ruled against her, and she had moved to California, apparently seeking a wealthy replacement husband. As for Jackson and me, we had reached a new understanding. Not the easy, unquestioning relationship we had before, but something more measured, more conscious. He visited regularly, called often, and showed through consistent actions that his change of heart was genuine. "I would like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. The room quieted. "To Frank, who looked out for me even after he was gone. To new beginnings that sometimes come from painful endings. And to all of you who have shown me that worth is not measured by what we can do, but by who we are and how we treat each other." Later, after the guests had left and Jackson had gone home, Maria helped me prepare for bed. She had become an important presence in my life. Her kindness and respect, a daily reminder that not all connections are based on what can be gained. "You seem at peace tonight," she observed as she arranged my pillows the way I preferred them. "I am." I agreed. Not because everything is perfect, but because I have learned to accept what is while still working toward what could be. It was a philosophy that had emerged from necessity but had become a choice. The accident had taken much from me, but it had also given me insights I might never have gained otherwise. It had revealed the true nature of those around me, for better and worse. It had forced me to find strength I did not know I possessed. I thought about what I would tell others who might find themselves suddenly vulnerable, dependent on family, who saw them as a burden rather than a person of value. I would say that dignity is not something others can take from you. It is something you claim for yourself. That worth does not diminish with ability. That sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. The inheritance from Frank had provided the financial means for my independence, but the real legacy he left was the push to reclaim my life on my own terms. The money was a tool, not the solution itself. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself grateful for the journey, difficult as it had been. The man I was now, wiser and more compassionate, was in many ways stronger than the physically capable builder I had been before. Not despite my limitations, but because of how I had learned to live with them. Life rarely follows the path we expect. The construction site accident had changed everything in an instant. My son's betrayal had shattered illusions I had cherished. My brother's final gift had opened doors I had thought forever closed. "You are nothing but a cripple, a burden we are forced to feed." Amanda's cruel words no longer had the power to wound me. They had become simply wrong, a judgment based on a limited understanding of what gives a life value. I had rebuilt myself just as surely as I had once built a company from nothing. And in that rebuilding, I had discovered that some foundations, once properly laid, can withstand any storm. What is your story of family betrayal or unexpected strength? Have you ever had to stand up to loved ones who underestimated or mistreated you? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding dignity in difficult circumstances. Share this video with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth, regardless of their limitations. Thank you for listening. And remember that true strength often comes from within, especially when everything else seems lost.